Hey folks, Nathan here. It is late at night, the baby is asleep, the wife is out of town. What does that mean? It's time for actually recording some more of these mini Q&A episodes. I know it's been a little bit since the last ones, but that has allowed at least some questions to accumulate in the comment section of the newer videos, which were videos 7, 8, 9, and 10. So in this series, where you'll see me wearing the blue Destiny shirt, this series of episodes, I don't know how many there's going to be at this point, but in this series of episodes, I'll be answering questions from 7, 8, 9, and 10, which means that if you want to ask new questions for future episodes, go ahead and put them in the comments of this video and any of these other newer ones as they're being produced. But understand that as soon as you start seeing more episodes released that don't have the blue Destiny shirt, I've moved on to the next batch, and that's where I'll be answering questions underneath this video and the other blue Destiny shirt videos before picking up on anything else that is new. So once you start seeing episodes that are not in this shirt, that means that you need to put the questions under those new ones, not these with the blue shirt. But for now, with these being the current ones, put them on the blue shirt, which is going to confuse the hell out of people watching this like a year from now, right? But suffice to say, always put your questions on the newest ones if you can. It's easy to search because I name them all the same, just with a number. So we pick up with questions asked, and there weren't very many, but questions asked under mini Q&A video number 7. The first one comes from Max Williams, who asks, do you read all the Marvel comics physical or digital? I read them typically digital at this point, but I have them actually both. Essentially what happened with me, the pattern I got into, was that I was reading the comics as they were coming in the mail, because I had moved down to Georgia, and eventually my father-in-law's, who's now my father-in-law, my father-in-law's comic shop closed. So rather than driving to another town nearby and driving like half an hour to 45 minutes to go to a comic shop, I just started ordering them online. I get them all through Things from Another World. And the thing about it, though, is that at our old apartment, we just had some really horrible luck with the Postal Service. Not to say we're having great luck here with deliveries, it's just that here the Postal Service tends to be better than UPS or FedEx. FedEx delivered my copy of Nemesis to not only a house number that was 100 lower than our house number, but the wrong street. A different street across the way with a completely different name. Good job, FedEx. That's when they deliver at all, or don't just dump stuff on our lawn by the mailbox. UPS just usually doesn't ring the doorbell and just kind of drops and dashes. But back at the old apartment, boy, the Postal Service sucked. And usually what would happen is I'd get these comics coming in these hard cardboard mailers, and they'd be bent all to hell. Either bent to fit them into a mailbox they're not supposed to fit into so they don't have to use a little package spot for them, or seemingly bent along the way in transit. So it finally got to a point where instead of getting these weekly packages of new comics, where I was basically a week behind because of the travel time, I finally said screw it and switched to UPS. But the cost meant that I needed to basically do a month at a time to make the cost of shipping at all worthwhile. So now, even at our new house where UPS isn't as good as a USPS, we're still getting the packages through UPS once a month with the new comics in them. But I don't want to wait that long. So what happens is that I read them on Comixology. I have them subscribed through Comixology, so I automatically get those each month. But it's wound up being a blessing, sort of, because while I'm getting those digital copies and reading them, then getting the physical copies to put in my collection, though sometimes reading them digitally means I forget to order a physical copy of something, oops, and have to go back and chase it down. It means that all the digital copies from the Marvel stuff, I'm able to hand off to Mark Herleman, who, of course, is my co-host on Star Wars Beyond the Films. So he's able to keep up with them without having to go out and buy individual issues, except for the storylines he actually wants to have physically, because he's getting those digital copies from me, and that leaves basically just the IDW stuff or the Yen Press stuff that he's not getting. So he's able to read them, I'm able to read them, and we basically just wind up with me sort of purchasing them twice, but with it sometimes parceled out to weeks and sometimes to a month, I don't feel it as much, so I think it's a good enough arrangement that I'm sticking with it for now. So I read them digitally, I have them in both forms, having purchased them in both forms with the extra digital copy that's actually from the code in the comic going to Mark. A much more elaborate answer than simply digital or physical, but hopefully that answers your question. Then a question here from Retro Universe, which is the only other question from video number 7, by the way. The rest are essentially comments. Says, got another fun question for you. This is from Retro Universe. I think I said that, but it's late at night. Forgive me. Do you have a favorite Star Wars reference that was used in a non-Star Wars form of media? Television, comic book, video game, etc. If so, what was it? Why, yes I do. And I can tell you exactly what it was. I don't even have to think about it. It's an episode early on in Criminal Minds where Spencer Reid, they haven't even done anything in the office with the characters at that point, I believe. Or at least not from that particular situation where it's showing those particular characters in that episode. And basically it jumps in, and here's Spencer Reid talking all about the construction of the Death Star and some inconsistencies he's wondering about. Lucas says this, but in the essential chronology, he actually references Dan Wallace's new essential chronology, though he just calls it essential chronology. I believe it was the new essential chronology that was out at the time, and the original essential. But he makes a reference to the essential chronology, and then Morgan basically just gets up and starts walking away. He's like, well, where are you going? Where are you going? I'm getting the last 5 minutes of my life back, or something to that effect. That's always been one of my favorite references, especially because I got to see as Dan Wallace, see the online reaction from him, as he first saw that there was a reference to the essential chronology in Criminal Minds. And then he, of course, then shared that with others. So that was pretty cool to actually get to see that. Kind of like, a reaction video, except in slow motion because it's all through social media postings rather than videos. Now that's going to jump us over Mini Q&A number 8. Why? Mini Q&A number 8 has comments, but they're all comments basically replying to what I said in the episode rather than asking actual questions for use in future episodes. So Mini Q&A 7, done. 8, done. Moving on to 9. The first question from Q&A number 9 comes from Senator Confer, Jonathan Confer, who asks, Legends Canon Infinities. What are your favorite and least favorite comic arcs/series in each continuity? Ignoring Legacy for Legends, since I'd like to hear your second place choice. He knows, of course, that I would say that Legacy is my favorite for Legends. So quick blast, favorite, least favorite. I mean, this is kind of going off the top of my head now, and maybe different than if you ask me on a different day in a different video, because it's all kind of stream of consciousness here. But second place choice after Legacy for Legends as a favorite would be the Tales of the Jedi stuff, though particularly the Ulic Qel-Droma Exar Kun era stuff. Wasn't as fond of the Golden Age of the Sith and Fall of the Sith Empire stuff. Still good, but not really my thing. I'm much more into sort of the tragic hero type things, or the people who've lost their way and are seeking redemption. That's probably why I like Kylo Ren. It's definitely why I like Ulic Qel-Droma. Ulic Qel-Droma is a fascinating character in that sense, and so is Cade Skywalker, after whom my wife and I named our son. But again, I'm not supposed to use Legacy here. Least favorite in Legends? Some of the stupid shit from early stuff in Tales that wasn't meant to be in continuity, but then got referenced in something else and kind of dragged kicking and screaming into continuity. Let's see. Gosh. And people want to have me go for like stuff like the Crystal Star or Ruins of Dantooine, but they're nothing compared to some of the real shit that's out there. And there's some pretty crappy stuff. Darth Vader and the Ninth Assassin springs to mind. Just a bad, poorly written series. We talked about that a lot in Star Wars Beyond the Films and got some flack for that. Yeah, I mean, there's just, bits and pieces that just are not good. But a lot of it is that when they're writing a story that's just meant to jump off of something without actually having any continuity relevance. So there's tons of little stupid things like that within Legends, because they had the time to have a bunch of that kind of stuff. Canon, favorite stuff in canon, Lost Stars, hands down, it is Lost Stars. But I would say that Inferno Squad is up there as well as a very good read. There are others. Let's see, least favorite from canon thus far? That one's going to have some competition. Is it Phasma? Is it the craptastic, half of a certain point of view, but we ignore the good half of it? Does it go to the irrelevant Tales from a Galaxy Far, Far Away aliens? There's plenty to choose from for canon already for poorly done stuff, unfortunately. And then Infinity's favorite? I gotta say, I'm still particularly partial to the original Infinity's A New Hope adaptation. The Infinity's A New Hope, well, I guess not adaptation, but an alternate reality thing based on the film, The Empire one was good and the Jedi one was good, but there was just something special about the A New Hope one, with it being the first time to really do a what if kind of story for Star Wars that wasn't some little tiny tale. It was actually a little mini series by itself. A series, albeit a mini series, and it kicked off the whole idea of doing that for the other films. So that's definitely a favorite. And then if you want to go for, other Infinity stuff, there's plenty of video game type things. Like I like the dark side missions where you're playing as the fallen version of Starkiller, building off of The Force Unleashed 1. But of course, that's not, in continuity. I almost said canonical, but then somebody would get pissy, terminology-wise. And least favorite of Infinities, again, most of the early shit in Tales that actually was Infinities and stayed Infinities. Infinities was something that until Jeremy Barlow came in and sort of changed the approach to it, and a little bit before that, it was a series that was like, here's a cool, serious story. Now here's some stupid, goofy shit that nobody is going to really get into unless you basically have been hit on the head a lot. So have fun, it's basically as if someone has filled up, a cauldron full of urine and have put some really, really tasty apples in it, and you're going bobbing for those apples. I'm not sure it's worth it to bob for those apples, given that it's surrounded by a bunch of piss. Then, a question from 5 picoseconds, who asks, what are your top 3 favorite MCU shows, that is Marvel Cinematic Universe, and also if you could write another Star Wars story, what era would you try out, and also what format, TV, comic, novel, video game, short story, etc. I think I've answered that one, but why not? My idea might have changed by now, so we'll dive into both. For top MCU shows, I'm gonna have to go with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's had its down points, but in general, I've really enjoyed Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for the most part. Probably after that, I'm going with Jessica Jones, which may even be above that. Second season wasn't as strong, but man, that first season and the dark places that it went, that was a really good one, and David Tennant, did great as the villain. And then of the others, it's really kind of a crapshoot in a lot of ways. I guess I would probably go with Daredevil. But once you start getting past Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Jessica Jones, you are down into either Daredevil, Punisher, and then the others that I think kind of were compared to those. So, generally speaking, unless you want to just, take the cop out and say, okay, well, we're going to go with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., we're going to go with Jessica Jones, and then we're going to go with just Defenders, so I don't have to choose between any of the other Netflix stuff. Actually did enjoy the second season of Marvel's Runaways on Hulu a little bit more than the first season, but it still wouldn't be one that I would put up there as a must-watch. I'd put it kind of right there around with Inhumans or Agent Carter. Watch it once so you know where it fits within the continuity, but you're probably not going to care to watch it again. Which is probably where I'd put Iron Fist and Luke Cage, actually, too. Then if I were to get a chance to do something for Star Wars again, where would I put it? Assuming that it needed to be canon, because that's the publishing line that exists right now, I would be probably aiming for some time period that has not been explored, so to have complete creative freedom with it. Something in the far past, something in the far future, though far past is probably quite a bit safer at this point. And what media? For me, usually prose fiction has been what I've come across best through. Actually, my books, Greater Good, which was self-published in 2009 and then professionally published in 2012, is going to be getting a new edition soon through Arcbeetle Press, and that new release is going to include my self-published novella Echoes from 2006, slightly tweaked, that hasn't ever seen a professional release as part of that book. And, getting a chance to do stuff for Wars and sort of reintroduce that universe to people, having a chance to delve into stuff for 10,000 Dawns. I definitely feel like prose fiction I'm going to do a better job with than comic, even though the Star Wars comic for Tales was the first thing that I ever had professionally published, which was odd. So something like that. Although, honestly, if it really comes down to it, if I were to write something, I almost feel like I would be more in the mindset these days of not even writing something fictional, but writing something nonfiction. But that's probably because my mind right now is so fixated on getting that progress made on the next edition of a Saga on Home Video, and I'm so proud of that work that came out a couple of years ago. So, you know, but definitely something, if I were to write again in the fictional Star Wars universe, I would want to put it somewhere where I would have the freedom to do stuff and know it would not be trampled over, and I could actually do some epic stuff to turn around to the people writing the books and the comics now and say, hey, guess what, guys? You can actually tell epic stories in Star Wars. You don't have to pussyfoot around because of the new films and not wanting to step on the toes of where they might go with future television series. Grow some cojones, or guts, or, you know, whatever the people in charge happen to need. Then questions from Punk Nerd. It was actually a couple of different posts, but we'll just cover them all together because they're all from the same person. The first one is, have you considered collecting Star Wars Funko Pop exclusives and records, cassettes, and CDs? And then, do you like Green Day? I'm a huge fan and have a CD collection of theirs. So, Funko Pop? No. I have no interest whatsoever in the Funko Pop stuff. That said, my wife is a collector of primarily Yoda stuff, and then as sort of a secondary thing now, Kylo Ren stuff. So we've actually got some Funko Pops here, but they're primarily hers. The only Funko Pop that I actually own is this Yoda right here, and that's because it's in the French Blu-ray set of seasons 1 through 5 of Clone Wars. I've been actually thinking about getting the DVD version of that so I can compare them in the book as like a little sidebar, but they tend to run almost $200, and I'm not sure about it. Maybe whenever I get some extra pay from extra students for the semester, I'll drop the money on it, but not at the moment. As for collecting the other stuff, I don't really have much interest in the musical side of things. I mean, I barely even listen to the Star Wars music that I already have. So, no. I mean, I've never really delved into it. So for me, it's basically I'd like to have the stuff to listen to when I want to listen to it, but by and large, I'm not going to collect the stuff. I do have the original 1977 soundtrack LP, the record, that my mom got back then and handed off to me years and years later. I do, of course, have the soundtrack CD for Revenge of the Sith because it comes with the Musical Journey DVD, and in fact, I just repurchased it because I wanted to actually have the big packaging to show in a Saga on Home Video and from the Star Wars Home Video library, so, you know, funny you mentioned that I did just buy one, technically. But then really, other than that, there's no particular format that I have the stuff in. There's movies I certainly don't have the soundtracks to, and I think part of that is that for me, in a lot of ways, it's the action conveyed with the music that really does it for me. It's a situational type of thing. So the music without the action going with it doesn't really capture me quite as much. And a lot of the Star Wars music that I really particularly enjoy is stuff that's not from the films anyway. So like, for instance, I really dig the stuff from The Force Unleashed. But part of it's because it brings back the memories of playing the game and the sense of action that went with it. So again, it's kind of a situational type of thing, but definitely not something I plan to collect. Green Day, they were of my youth. In fact, they played, Good Riddance? They played that over a slideshow, yes, actual slides, when I graduated from high school at our, they called it class day. It was like a chance for everybody to get together and do like a thing in the building before the actual commencement ceremony, I think a day later or whatever it was, outside of the building. But literally outside. My high school had this gigantic football stadium called the Bowl, and we had the graduation ceremony actually down in that. Around here in the Atlanta area, people like renting out these massive venues, and it's like we're gonna do it at Georgia State or whatever. Like, what? Don't you have a football stadium? But that's just me. So, I mean, it was part of my youth. There are songs of theirs I particularly like, but I'm not a huge fan of theirs by any means. So I'm not even sure if I have any physical discs of their stuff. I think I've got maybe 2 digital albums, but that's probably it. And wow, it turns out actually there's very few questions for number 10. So I'm just going to hit them here. This will be a longer mini Q&A than usual because I usually try to aim for about 20 to 25 minutes, but I'll go ahead and hit them. It'll probably be about 30 to 35, but then you can put questions underneath just this video for me to record for the next round. So I guess there will be just one episode with the Destinies shirt. I'm kind of shocked. I had forgotten how many of the responses were comments rather than questions this time. All right, so jumping over to Q&A number 10, Stephen Schinder writes a question that kind of ties into a previous question from number 10 that I didn't fully answer. He asked, where would you place Enterprise in your rankings? Because there was a question of how would I rank the Star Trek series, and I gave a ranking, and I realized only after I had started editing it that I had left out Enterprise. I would say Enterprise probably sits... I mean, it's going to be, for me, because of how hard it is to watch the original series or the animated series at this point, to actually sit through those episodes, I'd rank it above the original series or animated, but I don't think I could put it above any of the other ones. I think the biggest thing for me with Enterprise, I love time travel stuff. The Temporal Corridor stuff I actually thought was kind of cool, and I liked seeing sort of the origin stories of stuff we would see later. I thought that stuff was great with Enterprise. I think Enterprise, by and large, gets a bad rap for its storytelling. So I think its storytelling was stronger than most people give it credit for. But I go back and think about that show, and they're like, well, who's your favorite character for any particular Star Trek series? And I think of Enterprise, and I'm like, I guess Archer, because I barely remember any of them. Almost none of them made any damn impression on me whatsoever. It's a really bland series from a character standpoint, at least from my perspective. Maybe it's the fact that everything was so gray that just the characters bled together along with the color scheme. But yeah, so it was all right. I mean, I think that it was a fairly strong series compared to what people make it out to be, but it definitely wasn't one of the top ones for me. Then we have a question from Johnny Ringo, who says, hey Nathan, I've got a question for you that I know you've probably answered already at some point, but to be honest, I haven't watched one of your videos in a while, but what are your thoughts on the Disney Star Wars movies, and could you maybe rank them? Ranking I did recently, and I said I would not return to those again, so it's in one of the most recent batch. I want to say it was probably in episode number 7 of the mini-Qs, because I think it's one of the first questions I answered in the last run. But general thoughts on the Disney Star Wars movies, I think that they're really good Star Wars films, they're really good adventure films. I think, though, that we have to kind of keep in mind what they're trying to do with them. That's actually part of why I talk about it being difficult to rank Star Wars films anymore, because there's such a different thematic feel to many of them. With the original trilogy, Lucas was trying to do this, modern mythology type of thing. And then with the prequels, it was essentially a tragedy. And then here we are with these films from Disney, and they're just trying to tell a Star Wars adventure romp. With a little bit of their politics thrown into how they're making things like casting decisions and certain aspects of storytelling, perhaps. But just films, like blockbuster films, get people's butts in the seats, make us some money. So in that sense, it's hard to compare the styles of them. I would say that what I particularly find intriguing about the newer films, one is that we're finally at a point where even the technological limitations that Lucas ran into with the prequels are gone. And I almost think that with the prequels, his technological limitations weren't so much limits of the technology itself per se, as the fact that he'd been wanting that technology for so long that the limitation was that he didn't know when to stop with that, I think. Kind of looking over on bookshelves as I'm thinking here. So maybe it's the limitation was there was no brake pedal. But I think that these do a very good job of telling Star Wars stories. They're fun romps. And I feel like the pacing is a lot better. And I've said before that for me, pacing is a huge thing about being able to rewatch films and really, just dive into them for fun again instead of just watching them when I'm doing something else where I'm not really fully paying attention. Most of the Lucas Star Wars films had some point within them that kind of dragged, that makes it hard for me to sit down in one sitting and rewatch them unless I'm doing something else because I already know the films so well. Whereas with these films, they're newer, I haven't seen them as much, I don't know them as well, and they're faster paced and feel like they don't have the lulls in them as much, so I'm having a lot of fun going through and watching and rewatching them. I particularly did like Last Jedi and the subverting of expectations, and I'm curious where Episode 9 is going to go from here. So far, Disney is thumbs up for me on all 4 of these Star Wars films that they have put out. We'll just have to see whether they can keep up that track record as we're now moving into uncharted territory after Episode 9 with new trilogies and apparently no more A Star Wars Story films, and who knows what else beyond the horizon there. Then Josh McLaughlin asks, and again these are ones that have been answered before, so quick burst but not a full answer here. Says, sorry, I'm relatively new here, so if you've answered this, my bad, but I was wondering what your first time watching Star Wars was, and who was your favorite Sith Lord from Legends, if you have one. Again, I remember seeing Return of the Jedi in theaters with my mom. I believe that I have some vague memories of watching A New Hope on television in some form or another when I was little, and when I was a baby, my mom took me to see The Empire Strikes Back, but I don't remember it at all, and, you know, kind of sucks because now I'm the one who could sort of be a hypocrite because I really find it crazy when people bring babies to movie theaters. Favorite Sith Lord from Legends, if I have one. I am particularly fond at this point of, well, again, Ulic Qel-Droma is a no-brainer for me. Someone who thought they were doing good, went down a dark path. In a lot of ways, the psychology that Anakin had, just without the screwy, issues with his mom and whatnot in his childhood. So he is probably my absolute favorite, but I think that's kind of a cop-out because I always say he's one of my favorite characters anyway. He's probably my second favorite character beyond Cade Skywalker. So I would say that if I had to pick someone else, it would be Darth Krayt. And that's because of his ongoing backstory. I'm not nearly as fond of his look with the armor and everything, like, oh, he looks so badass. I think he looks kind of dumb with all the get-up on, really, until he takes his friggin' helmet off. But I must say, seeing him as Asherad Het and not knowing that Asherad Het would ever come back in the pages of Republic, before it was even called Republic, just the Star Wars Ongoing series is what it was called at the time. But seeing him in Outlander in that, a few more times in that series, and eventually finding it revealed that this is Darth Krayt, and then getting his background that ties into Obi-Wan, etc., was fantastic, and brought a whole new dimension to this character that until then we had thought of as kind of a one-dimensional Sith bad guy. Well, no, it turns out this guy has more going on than we knew, and it just added to the dynamic of an already great series. And then lastly, we're getting to about 35 minutes, coming from Logan Bayer. The question is, have you ever read the Thrawn duology, and would/have you do or done videos on them? So this is the point at which I do like the Will Smith thing and go, and point, but you can't see everything here. But massive EU collection here, pretty much complete, minus the stuff that I just didn't want to collect, like the little kid stuff, or the older RPG books, because RPG books I didn't want to have the storage space for them. And doing a massive 3,000 page plus Star Wars chronology document for about 20 years, almost 21 years, I would definitely say, yes, I have read the Thrawn duology. I actually really enjoyed the Thrawn duology. Just talking about the Hand of Thrawn stuff. Basically going back to Vision of the Future and Spectre of the Past, I believe. But really enjoyed those. Even if Thrawn wasn't in them, I liked the political intrigue of it. You didn't get that enough within a lot of the Legends Star Wars stuff until they started doing those giant series. And then if you are referring to the newer books, the Thrawn and Thrawn Alliance's kind of duology, thought the first one was quite good at giving Thrawn's background, good, kind of Sherlock Holmes type stuff. But I think you really needed Eli Vanto, because once you take out Eli and you pair him with Vader for Alliance, I don't think it works nearly as well. Haven't done videos on either of those two, but we did discuss both of them in depth on Star Wars Beyond the Films, which is the podcast I do with Mark Herleman that I mentioned before over at StarWarsReport.com. I don't think I ever did any videos on the Hand of Thrawn duology, because From the Star Wars Library didn't get that far when I was doing that, and that series is on indefinite hiatus, which basically means that it's canceled at this point. So, have not done videos on those that I can recall, and I actually don't think I've ever done podcasts specifically about them, because, let's see, I started podcasting in 2002 with Chrono Radio as basically the, third English language Star Wars podcast of any kind, after Jedi Talk and Digital Llama Radio, because Star Wars on Direct was in French. And by that point, we were well past that, because it had moved to Del Rey and they'd started the New Jedi Order stuff. So there wouldn't have been something for me to address it on prior to that. So yeah, I don't think I've ever done anything on the Hand of Thrawn duology, but definitely on the newer stuff, but not in video form, in podcast form. Now, he does say that he was looking for a recap, by the way. I looked in the further comments, and he does specify Hand of Thrawn, but that he was looking for a recap of Spectre of the Past before going into Vision of the Future. If you need summaries, for existing Star Wars stories, at least up until when I stopped the Star Wars Timeline Gold back in August of last year. Go pick up the Star Wars Timeline Gold, starwarsfanworks.com/timeline. Download that. What you're looking for in that case is going to be Legends Volume 2, which is the A New Hope and Onward Legends chronology document. Just search for Spectre of the Past and Vision of the Future. You will find detailed summaries of each there on the Star Wars Timeline Gold. And no, for folks who follow that and go, oh, this is cool, oh my god, you need to bring it back. No. I laid out my reasons for ending the project after 20 years in a earlier video on the channel, right? Which we don't really want to get back into. So, with that said, yeah, that takes care of all of the questions from the comment sections of mini Q&A videos 7, 8, 9, and 10, which is the last batch. This will be the only one, it would seem, for this batch here, number 11. So put any questions you would like to see answered in future episodes down in the comments under this video. I will pick them up and use them for the next batch or single episode, however many it turns out to be, and I'll make sure I'm wearing something different so you can easily tell between when each batch of episodes has been recorded. With that, thank you for your questions. I really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed the mini Q&A, and I'll catch you on the next of the mini Q&As here on the channel.